Good evening, everyone. Wondering if anyone has been doing any planting or gardening. So with our Stockwell Roots activity pack this week, we gave people pots to paint in mudcloth design and some seeds to grow. And we've had some really lovely photos back already where they're already sprouting over several days. We're trying to do a bit of growing got some spinach and chard. Only got a small space to be able to do it, so it's trial and error and seeing what produce we can grow ourselves, which is nice and satisfying and nice to come and water and seeing them slowly come through the soil and have new life. So chapter 10 of Maya the Bee is called The Wonders of the Night. Thus the days and weeks of her young life pass for little Maya among the insects in a lovely summer world. A happy roving in garden and meadow, occasional risks and many joys. For all that, she often missed the companions of her early childhood, and now and again suffered a pang of homesickness, an ache of longing for her people and the kingdom that she had left. There were hours too where she yearned for regular, useful work and the association with friends of her own. However, at the bottom she had a reckless nature. Little Maya had, and she was scarcely ready to settle down for good and to live in the community of bees. She wouldn't have felt very comfortable. Often, among animals as well as human beings, there are some who cannot conform to the ways of the others. Before we condemn them, we must be careful and give them a chance to prove themselves. For it is not always laziness or stubbornness that makes them different. Far from it. At the back of the peculiar urge is a deep longing for something higher or better than what everyday life has to offer. And many a time, young runaways have grown up into good, sensible, experienced men and women. Little Maya was a pure, sensitive soul, and her attitude to the big, beautiful world came of a genuine eagerness for knowledge and a great delight in the glories of creation. Yet it's hard to be alone, even when you're happy, and the more Maya went through, the greater became her yearning for companionship and love. She was no longer very young. She had grown into a strong, superb creature with sound, bright wings, a sharp, dangerous sting, and a highly developed sense of both the pleasures and the hazards of her life. Through her own experience, she had gathered information and stored up wisdom, which she now often wished she could apply to something of real value. There were days when she was ready to return to the hive and throw herself at the Queen's feet and sue for pardon and honourable reinstalment. But a great burning desire held her back, and the desire to know more of human beings. She had heard so many contradictory things about them, and she was confused rather than enlightened. Yet she had a feeling that in the whole of creation there were no beings more powerful or more intelligent or more sublime than they. A few times in her wanderings she had seen people, but only from afar, from high up in the air, big and little people, and such dressed in many colours. She had never ventured close. Once she had caught the glimmer of red near a brook and thought it was the bed of flowers had blown down, but she found a human being fast asleep among the brookside blossoms. It had golden hair and a pink face and wore a red dress. It was dreadfully large, of course, but it still looked so good and sweet. And Maya thrilled and tears came to her eyes. She had lost all sense of her whereabouts. She could do nothing but gaze and gaze upon the slumbering presence. All the horrid things she had ever heard against men seemed utterly impossible. Lies they must have been, mean lies, that she'd been told against creatures as charming as this sleeping one in the shade of the whispering birch trees. After a while, a mosquito came and buzzed greetings. "Look!" cried Maya, hot with excitement and delight. "Look! Just look at the human being there! How good! How beautiful! Doesn't it fill you with enthusiasm?" The mosquito gave Maya a surprised stare and turned slowly round to glance at the object of her admiration. "Yes, it is good. I just tasted it. I stung it. Look! My body is shining red with its blood." Maya had to press her hand to her heart, so startled she was by the mosquito's daring. "Will it die?" she cried. "Where did you wound it? How could you? How vile! Why, you're a beast of prey." The mosquito tittered. "Why, it's only a very little human being," it answered in its high, thin voice. "It's the size," called girl. "The size at which the legs are covered halfway up to the separate coloured casting. My sting, of course, goes through the casting, but usually doesn't reach the skin. Your ignorance is really stupendous. Do you think that all human beings are good? I haven't come across one who has willingly let me take the tiniest drop of its blood." "Well, I don't know much about human beings, I admit," said Maya humbly. "But of all the insects, you bees have most to do with human beings. That's a well-known fact." I left our kingdom," said Maya timidly. "I didn't like it. I wanted to learn about the outside world." Well, what do you think of that?" The mosquito drew a step nearer. "How do you like your free lancing? I must say I admire you for your independence. I, for one, would never consent to serve human beings." "But they serve us too," said Maya, who couldn't bear a sight to be put upon her people. "Maybe. To which nation do you belong?" "I come of the nation in the castle park. The ruling queen is Helen the 8th. "Indeed," said Mosquito, and bowed low. "An invadable lineage, my deepest respects. There was a revolution in your kingdom not so long ago, wasn't there? I heard it from the messengers of the rebel swarm. Am I right?" "Yes," said Maya, proud and happy that her nation was so respected and renowned. Homesickness for the people awoke again, deep down in her heart, and she wished she could do something good and great for her queen and country. Carried away on the wings of dream, she forgot to ask about human beings. Or like as not, she refrained from questions, feeling that the mosquito would not tell her things that she would like to hear. The might of a creature impressed her as a saucy mix, and people of her kind usually had nothing good to say of others. Besides, she soon flew away. "I'm going to take one more drink," she called back to Maya. "Later, I and my friends are going to fly into the light of the westering sun. Then we'll sure to have a good weather tomorrow." Maya made off quickly. She couldn't bear to stay and see the mosquito hurt the sleeping child. And how could she do this thing? Hadn't Cassandra said if you sting a human being, you will die? Maya still remembered every detail of this incident with the child and the mosquito, but her craving to know humans had not been stilted. She made up her mind to be bolder and never stop trying until she reached her goal. At last, Maya's longing to know human beings was to be satisfied, and in a far away, more wonderful than ever, she had a dream. Once, on a warm evening, having gone to sleep earlier than usual, She woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. Something that had never happened to her before. When she opened her eyes, she was in astonishment. Her little bedroom was all steeped in quiet blush radiance. It came down through the entrance, and the entrance itself shone as if it hung with a silver blue curtain. Maya dare not budge at first, though not because she was frightened, no. Somehow, along with the light, came a rare, lovely peacefulness. And outside her room the air was filled with the sound, finer than and more harmonious than any music she had ever heard. After a time she rose timidly, awed by the glamour and the strangeness of it all, and looked out. The whole world seemed to lie under the spell of the enchantment. Everything was sparkling and glittering in pure silver. The trunks of the birch trees, the slumbering leaves, were overlaid with silver. The grass, which from her height seemed to lie under delicate veils, was set with 1,000 pale pearls. All things far and near, the silent distances, were shrouded in this soft blush sheen. "This must be the night," Maya whispered and folded her hands. High up in the heavens, partly veiled by the leaves of the beech tree, hung a full clear disk of silver, from which the radiance poured down and beautified the world. And then Maya saw countless bright, sharp little lights surrounding the moon in the heavens. Oh, so still and beautiful, unlike any shining thing she'd ever seen before. To think she beheld the night, the moon and the stars, the wonders, the lovely wonders of the night. She had heard of them, but never believed in them. It was almost too much. Then the sound rose again, the strange night sound that must have awakened her. It came from nearby, filling the welkin, a soaring chirp with a silvery ring that matched the silver on the trees and leaves and grass, and it seemed to come riling down from the moon on the beams of the silver light. Maya looked about for the source in vain. In the mysterious drift of light and shadow, it was difficult to make out objects in clear outline. Everything was draped mysteriously, and yet everything showed up true, in such beauty. Her room could keep her no longer. Out she had to fly into this new splendour, the night splendour. "The good Lord will take care of me," she thought. "I am not bent upon wrong." As she was about to fly off through the silver light to her favourite meadow, now lying full under the moon, she saw a winged creature alight on a beech tree leaf not far away. Scarcely alighted, it raised its head to the moon, lifted its narrow wings, and drew the edge of one against the other, for all the world as though it was playing on a violin. And sure enough, the sound came, the silvery chirp that filled the whole moonlight world with melody. "Exquisite," whispered Maya. "Heavenly, heavenly, heavenly." She flew over to the leaf. The night was so mild and warm that she did not notice it was cooler than by day. When she touched the leaf, the chirper broke off playing abruptly, and to Maya it seemed as if there would never been such a stillness before. So profound was the hush that followed, it was uncanny. Through the dark leaves filtered the light, white and cool. "Good night," said Maya, politely thinking. "Good night," was the greeting for the night, like good morning. For the morning, "Please excuse me for interrupting, but the music you make is fascinating, and I had to find out where it came from." The chirper stared at Maya wide-eyed. "What sort of crawling creature are you?" it asked after some moments had passed. "I've never seen a creature like you." "I'm not a crawling insect," said Maya. I am Maya of the nation of bees. Oh, the nation of bees, indeed. But you live by day, don't you? I've heard of your race from the hedgehog. He told me that in the evening he eats the dead bodies that are thrown out of your hive. Yes, said Maya with a faint chill of apprehension. That's so. Cassandra told me about him. She heard of him from the centaurs. He comes when twilight falls and snouts in the grass looking for dead bodies. But do you associate with the hedgehog? Why, he's an awful brute. I don't think so. We tree crickets get along with him splendidly. We call him Uncle. Of course, he always tries to catch us, but he never succeeds. So we have great fun teasing him. Everyone has to live, doesn't he? Just so he doesn't live off me. What do I care? Maya shook her head. She didn't agree, but not caring to insult the cricket by contradicting, she changed the subject. So you're a tree cricket? Yes, a snowy tree cricket. But I must play, so don't keep me any longer. It's a full moon, a wonderful night. I must play. Oh, do make an exception this once. You play all the time. Tell me about the night. A midsummer night is the loveliest in the world, answered the cricket. It fills the heart with rapture. But what my music doesn't tell you, I shan't be able to explain. Why needed everything be explained? Why know everything? We poor creatures can't find out the tiniest bit about existence, yet we feel the glory of the whole wide world. And the cricket sat up in its happy, slippery strumming. Heard from close by where Maya sat, the music was overpowering in its loudness. The little bee sat quite still in the blue summer night, listening and musing deeply about life and creation. Silence fell. There was a faint whir, and Maya saw the cricket fly out into the moonlight. The night makes one feel sad, she reflected. Her flowery meadows drew her now, and she flew off. At the edge of the brook stood the tall irises, brokenly reflected in the running water. A glorious sight. The moonlight was whirled along in the braided current, and the wavelets winked and whispered, and the irises seemed to lean over asleep. Asleep from sheer delight, thought the little bee. She dropped down on a blue petal in the full light of the moon, and could not take her eyes off the living waters of the brook. The quivering flash, the flashing come and go of the countless sparks on the bank opposite. The birch trees glittered as if hung with the stars. Where is all the water flowing to, she wondered. The cricket is right. We know so little about the world. All of a sudden, a little fine voice rose in song from the flower of an iris close beside her, ringing like a pure, clear bell, different from any earthly sound that Maya knew. Her heart throbbed and she held her breath. Oh, what is going to happen? What am I going to see now? The iris swayed gently. One of the petals curved in at the edge, and Maya saw a tiny, snow-white human hand holding on to the flower's rim with its wee little fingers. Then a small blonde head arose, and then a delicate, luminous body in white garments. A human being in miniature was coming up out of the iris. A human being in miniature was coming out of the iris. Words cannot tell Maya's awe and rapture. She sat rigid. The tiny being climbed to the edge of the blossom, lifted its arms up to the moonlight, and looked out into the bright shining night with a smile of bliss lighting up its face. Then a quaint quiver shook its luminous body, and from its shoulders 2 wings unfolded, whiter than the moonlight, pure as snow, rising above its blonde head and reaching down to its feet. How lovely it was, how exquisitely lovely. Nothing that Maya had ever seen compared to its loveliness. Standing there in the moonlight, holding its hands up to heaven, the luminous little being lifted its voice again and sang. The song rang out into the night, and Maya understood the words. My home is light, the crystal bowl of heaven's blue, I love it so. Both death and life will change, I know, but not my soul, my living soul. My soul is that which breathes anew from all of loveliness and grace, and as if it flows from God's own face, it flows from his creations too. Maya burst into sobs. What is it that had made her so sad and yet so happy? She could not tell. The little human being turned around. Who is crying? He asked in his chiming voice. It's only me, stammered Maya. Excuse me for interrupting you. But why are you crying? I don't know. Perhaps it's because you are so beautiful. Who are you? Do tell me, I'm not asking much. You're an angel, aren't you? You must be. No, said the little creature, quite serious. I am only a sprite, a flower sprite. But dear little bee, what are you doing out here in the meadow so late at night? The sprite flew out over to a curving iris blade beside Maya and regarded her long and kindly from the swaying perch to the moonlight. Maya told him all about herself, what she had done, what she knew, and what she had longed for. And while she spoke, his eyes never left her, those large dark eyes gleaming in the white fairy face under the golden hair that ever anon shone like silver in the moonlight. When she finished, he stroked her head and looked at her so warmly and lovingly that little bee beside herself with joy had to lower her gaze. We sprites, he exclaimed, live 7 nights, but we must stay in the flower in which we are born, else we die at dawn. Maya opened her eyes wide in terror. Then hurry, fly back to your flower. The sprite shook his head sadly. Too late. But listen, I have more to tell you. Most of us sprites are glad to leave our flowers, never to return, because a great happiness is connected with our leaving. We are endowed with remarkable power. Before we die, we can fulfill the dearest wish of the first creature we meet. It is when we make up our minds seriously to leave the flower for the purpose of making someone happy that our wings will grow. How wonderful, cried Maya. I'd leave the flower too then. It must be lovely to fulfill another person's wish. That she was the first being from whom the sprite on its flight from the flower had met. And it did not occur to her. And then, must you die? The sprite nodded, but not sadly this time. We live to see the dawn still, he said, but when the dew falls, we are drawn into the fine cobweb veils that float above the grass and the flowers of the meadows. Haven't you often noticed the veils shine white as though the light were inside them? It's the sprites, their wings and their garments. When the light rises, we change into dewdrops. The plants drink us and we become a part of the growing and blooming until in time we rise again as sprites from out their flowers. Then you were once another sprite? Asked Maya, tense, breathless with interest. The earnest eyes said yes. But I have forgotten my earlier existence. We forget everything in our flower sleep. Oh, what a lovely fate. It is the same as that of all earthly creatures, when you really come to think of it, even if it isn't always flowers out of which they wake up from their sleep of death. But we won't talk of that tonight." "Oh, I'm so happy," cried Maya. "Then you haven't got a wish? You're the first person I've met, you know, and I possess the power to grant you with the dearest wish." But I'm a bee." "No, it's too much. It would be too great a joy. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve that you should be so good to me." "No one deserves the good and the beautiful. The good and the beautiful come to us like the sunshine." Maya's heart beat stormily. Oh, she did have a wish, a burning wish, but she didn't care confess it. The elf seemed to guess. He smiled, so you couldn't keep anything a secret from him. "Well," he stroked his golden hair for his pure forehead, "I'd like to know human beings at their best and their most beautiful," said the little bee. She spoke quickly and hotly. She was afraid she would be told that so great a wish would not be granted. But the sprite drew himself up to his expression was serious and serene, and his eyes shone with confidence. He took Maya's trembling hand and said, "Come, we'll fly together. Your wish shall be granted." What a beautiful chapter. Like, really lovely visual language that was used. It made me think of, it was actually Shakespeare's birthday yesterday, so that's the 22nd of April. 22nd? 23rd. And it made me think of Midsummer Night's Dream. And have you been having a chance to look up at the stars in the evenings? I don't know if you've noticed, just with less flights in the air, the sky is a lot brighter at night. So good night and sleep well, sweet dreams, and make a wish upon a star this evening. See you soon.